and relatively low freight volumes outside the main freight lines that are commercially viable, it becomes very challenging, and that's the fundamental problem. And of course, you've got the inevitable. If you invest in rail, that means there's less to spend in road. Are you sort of compromising both modes by trying to have a dollar each way? Maybe we might be better to focus our investment from a transport point of view in roads where the population is relatively low, and use rail where the population and the demand for freight movement is stronger, and that's kind of the golden triangle, Tauranga, Hamilton, Auckland, and that is the most viable line and network in New Zealand at the moment.
Excellent. Good to talk to you. Thank you, Stephen. That's Stephen Selwood, the Chief Executive of Infrastructure New Zealand. Do you, either of you two, use rail at all, Rob and Wellington?
A wee bit. I love, my daughter loves going on the train, so we occasionally do that. And historically, I used to, when I lived in Auckland, because I worked at Glen Innes for a while as a gardener, and I used to get, this is before the upgrade too, this is back in the first couple of years of the 1990s, used to, on those awful old Rattlely trains, get all the way, go from Kingston to Glen Innes. Personally, I love it because you can read on trains, whereas you can't read in cars. But I think the broader point that I'd bring back to with this, which was touched on there, was the unit costs of investing in something like rail. And look, I'd take it further than this. Some years ago, I tried to get some numbers on this, and there aren't any available. But my gut feeling, and I'm sticking to it, is New Zealand, per head of population, probably has the most expensive infrastructure in the world. And that's not just rail, it's not just road, it's all the other networks, electricity, telecoms, freight, shipping freight, all the rest of it. And the reasons for that are, they start with, small population base. There's only a small rating or taxation base, whatever you want to call it, to fund that. On top of that, we've got geographical issues around, we're a difficult place to put any infrastructure in because the population is spread out across a landmass the size of the UK or Japan. But, obviously there's only 4.5 billion of us. And we've got other geographical issues around, the Earth tends to move around a lot, and we've got flipping Cook Strait across the middle.
Maybe the problem too is economies of scale. We just can't realise those also because of the population. I'm going to jump in because I've only got about a couple of minutes left, and I really want to get to the smell and the food one because I'm fascinated by this. Nikki, you've heard about this research. We have had some terrible research stuff. There's nothing positive really, have we, this afternoon to cheer us up? But apparently smelling food can lead to weight gain. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I saw this, when I first saw this, I thought, it'll be because, of course, our sense of smell and our sense of taste are intrinsically linked. And so if we smell our food, perhaps it makes us eat more. But it turns out that research doesn't say that. The research is talking, it's a mouse study, so let's keep that in mind, people. It's on mice, not humans. But the research found that the mice without a sense of smell, which they'd chemically removed, and with a sense of smell, ate the same food. The smelling ones got fat and the non-smelling ones stayed the same.
It's appalling. And just before we go, Rob, what makes you salivate, food-wise?
Curries.
What about you, Nikki?
Roast chicken.
Oh, roast lamb for me too. Lovely to have you on the program, you guys. Thank you so much. Nikki Bazant and Rob Hosking with us on the panel. Jim's back with you tomorrow. Time now for the news.
Kia ora everyone. As the polar blast moves north, we'll be in Wellington and the Wairarapa where residents have been evacuated. Power is out to thousands of homes in parts of the lower North Island. We're in Ohakune, which has been cut off by heavy snow. We speak to truckies snowed in on the Napier Taupo Road, surviving on Marion's veggie soup and possum pie. We're in Dunedin where, despite the temperatures, thousands turned out for the final America's Cup parade. We're back in Matata where angry residents who face being forced from their homes because of coastal erosion tell us they're contemplating legal action, and the warning of a potential crisis in mental health care as community workers leave for higher pay. Do join us. We're back after the news.
RNZ News at 5. Kia ora, good afternoon. Ko Katrina Batten aho. The winter whiteout and deluge are hitting the central and lower North Island hard, with some evacuations, state highways closed and more than 10,000 homes without power. And forecasters say there's more to come. A handful of residents have been evacuated in Masterton. State Highway 1 is closed from Hunterville North through the Desert Road because of snow. The usual detour road through the National Park is also closed, as is State Highway 4 from Whanganui to Raitahi. There's been a massive dumping of snow in Ohakune, and blizzard conditions and the risk of avalanches has closed ski fields on Mount Ruapehu. Snow and ice have also closed the Napier-Taupo Road. Earlier today, about 20 motorists had to be rescued from their vehicles there. Some truck drivers have opted to stay with their vehicles, which isn't unusual, and others are hunkering down at truck stops along the road. There are warnings some people may be without power until tomorrow. The outages stretch from pockets in the Hutt Valley and some small areas north of Wellington through to Manawatu, Whanganui and into Taranaki, as well as Wairarapa and the central North Island. PowerCo's spokesperson Phil Marsh says the ongoing storm is making it difficult for contractors to get supplies back on.
I fear that there will be people off without power. I mean, we are battling to get as many on as we can, so it's normal that we will have a lower amount of crews overnight. They respond to emergencies, and as soon as first light comes around, we have teams back on the road again.
Phil Marsh from PowerCo. In Wairarapa, some areas have been without power since yesterday morning, and many cell phone towers have been running on batteries since then. It's anticipated that some of these may run out of power in the next few hours, resulting in a loss of cell phone, landline and broadband services. Heavy rain in Wairarapa has pushed up river levels, and one resident in Martinborough says water is coming across the road like a river. Kathy Hutchinson works at the Martinborough Hotel. She says there haven't been many customers through the doors today.
I haven't seen this much flooding in town like this. The whole square is flooded. The Ponatai Bridge was completely waters over the bridge, and now the Ruamahanga River Bridge is closed. So yeah, there's not many ways in and out of Martinborough now.
A Martinborough resident, Kathy Hutchison. The Emergency Operations Centre has been activated in the Manawatu and Whanganui regions. The Ruapehu, Tararua and Manawatu district councils have also activated their emergency centres. Horizon Regional Council Controller Michael McCartney says the team is monitoring rivers in Horowhenua and there may be potential flooding of properties in the Waikawa area. The storm is bringing snow to areas that very rarely see it. Catherine Sinclair has lived in the Mamaku Ranges to the west of Rotorua for 26 years. She says she's never seen anything like it.
Absolutely beautiful. It's the panga palms have all collected the snow, so they're standing out against the backdrop of native bush, and the hills are covered in snow, and it's just falling steadily. It's very still and quiet. It's just gorgeous.
Catherine Sinclair, who lives in the Mamaku Ranges. A judge says a fraud that enabled a man running a pokie machine trust to take millions of dollars in backhanders struck at the heart of the gambling regulation system. Michael O'Brien has been jailed for 4.5 years after earlier being found guilty of 5 charges of obtaining by deception. The 58-year-old concealed his control of the Bluegrass Trust, which distributed pokie machine profits in Blenheim, because the gambling regulator, the Department of Internal Affairs, considered he was an unsuitable person to be involved in such enterprises. In the High Court in Wellington today, Justice Dobson said O'Brien's running of the trust was devised to avoid any reference to him at all.
You distanced yourself from the organisation of the trust. You represented your father as acting in your place by forging his signature on relevant documents and sending emails purporting to come from him. It was relatively sophisticated, of deceiving those who were entitled to rely on the integrity of the applicants.
Justice Dobson. The Buller Mayor says a multi-million-dollar funding boost will help his district diversify its economy and tap into growing industries. The government has today released a $36.8 million action plan to help the West Coast's economy grow. It comes after a study last year found there was scope for the West Coast to grow its economy and invest in the tourism, horticulture and technology sectors. The Mayor, Gary Howard, says the funding gives the region the opportunity to diversify its economy.
It's not all just about mining. There was a big emphasis on tourism, and we're really keen on getting more people with IT, with lifestyle, and actually being able to have and facilitate more of that is really important, and the government support and Taipei Polytech support for that is really good.
Gary Howard says the timelines on the action plan are ambitious but achievable. It's 5:05. To sport, the Hurricanes have named their strongest possible lineup to play the Super Rugby competition leaders, the Crusaders, in Wellington on Saturday. All Blacks TJ Perenara, the Barrett brothers, Bowden and Geordie, the Savea brothers, Ardi and Julian, and midfielder Ngani Laumape all return following the British and Irish Lions series. The defending champions need to beat the Crusaders to avoid heading to South Africa for the first round of the playoffs next week. Meanwhile, the British and Irish Lions captain, Sam Warburton, says the All Blacks remain the best team in the world. The Lions have arrived back in Britain, and despite drawing the 3-test series, Warburton says the All Blacks remain the benchmark in world rugby.
They still remain the best team in the world, even though we managed to get a win out there. What they've achieved over the last 10 years has been incredible, so they still earn that right to definitely be the best team in the world.
Sam Warburton. Auckland has lost the National Rugby League Nines competition. The NRL has suspended the competition from next year, citing the need to ease the workload on players following the World Cup later this year. Its Chief Commercial Officer, Andrew Abdo, says in all likelihood the Nines tournament will be held in Australia when it returns to the playing calendar, but Auckland may get to host it on a rotational basis. And the New Zealand men's softball team have bounced back from their upset loss to Venezuela at the World Champs in Canada with an 8-1 win over Denmark. That's the news.
A storm pummels Wellington.
The sea is totally white. You can't see any clear water. And the air just tastes like salt. It's that windy. There is that much spray. It's that horrible.
A family trying to bring their luggage into the airport. One father had one child under one arm, another child on the other, and his luggage was actually being blown away.
In Dunedin.
They were worried about potential for black ice this morning and lots of traffic accidents, but it's a mild 5 degrees here.
Whatever the weather. Morning Report, weekdays from 6. Then on 9 to noon, 1 year on and support for predator-free 2050 is gathering pace. But scientists warn it's an impossible goal as the situation stands. And after 10, young Christchurch inventor Sam Mackwell shares his passion for the steam engine. Join me, Catherine Ryan, on 9 to noon after Morning Report on RNZ National.
Met Service weather through to midnight tomorrow, and warnings and watches are in force for heavy rain, snow and strong winds over central and eastern areas. Northland and Auckland showers, some heavy and possibly thundery, easing tomorrow morning. Waikato and Waitomo, also Coromandel, Bay of Plenty in the central high country. Periods of rain with snow above 400 metres at first, easing later tomorrow. Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, periods of rain with snow above 600 metres at first, persistent with heavy falls and possible thunderstorms tomorrow. Taranaki to Wellington, Wairarapa and the Marlborough Sounds, rain with heavy falls and snow above 600 metres at first, easing later today or early tomorrow. Severe southerly gales in exposed places easing from this evening. For the remainder of Marlborough and Canterbury, showers with snow above 400 metres at first, gradually easing. Nelson and Buller through to Fiordland, cloudy in Nelson today, otherwise fine. Otago and Southland, isolated showers clearing later today. And for the Chatham Islands, a few showers with rain tomorrow. It's coming up to 5:09, and you're listening to Checkpoint.
Thank you very much, Katrina Batten, and thank you everyone for being with us. Coming up on Checkpoint tonight, fears of an exodus of workers from mental health care, the very personal politics of climate change. What can councils and governments do and not do if your home is at risk? A West Coast Action Plan, gold near Paeroa and Possum Pie. But first, the weather and its significant impact. Power is out to more than 10,000 homes across the lower North Island tonight as winds equivalent to a Category 3 cyclone. Heavy rain and snow take down power lines, cause flooding, close roads and make driving treacherous where roads are open. Homes in parts of New Plymouth, Whanganui, Palmerston North, Taihape and Masterton are without power. The central North Island towns of Raitihi and Ohakune have been cut off. There have been evacuations due to heavy flooding, and Wairarapa and Wellington has been battered. To put in context how big this low now is, it's 7 degrees in Dunedin as we speak. And well over 1,000 k further north, it's 7 degrees in Auckland too. Jacob McSweeney begins our coverage.
North of the capital in Masterton, residents had to be evacuated from some homes on Jones Place after stormwater drains couldn't handle the deluge there. The local civil defence officers say there is widespread flooding in the region and are advising residents to only travel if absolutely necessary. A spokesperson says he's expecting the situation to get worse before it gets better, with rain not easing up until 8 o'clock tomorrow morning. 7 kilometres north of Masterton, resident Ronnie Percy says it's some of the worst flooding she's seen.
Oh, we woke up to floods on the flats and the ducks were out there swimming and they'd come up from the bottom. And then, of course, this morning it was raining right through and heavily all night. So that was the cause of all that. It's probably the biggest floods we've had here.
In Martinborough, hotel worker Kathy Hutchison describes what the day has been like.
Raining solid all day, very wet. I work just right on the square at the Martinborough Hotel, and the square's all full of water, and the gutters are all full. There's sort of water coming over the road like a river.
In Wellington, the last flight to land from Christchurch was a bumpy one, with passengers describing it as being like nothing they'd ever experienced.
Very bumpy, but we landed. The pilot did a great job, so until we actually saw land, it's like, yep, no, we're all good to go.
Now when you go over bumps really fast in a car and you're going up and down, and your stomach drops, it was like that.
It's quite windy even just sitting in the plane out there. We were rocking quite a bit from side to side, waiting to get off.
It was real bumpy, and then we stopped on the tarmac, and then the wind picked up and it moved the whole plane sideways.
Winds of up to 167 kilometres per hour lashed the capital, bringing down power lines and sending outdoor furniture flying. Civil Defence Controller Bruce Pepperell was fed up that some Wellingtonians didn't realise items as big as trampolines could be picked up and thrown around.
Oh, hell yeah, we've seen it on numerous occasions. We've had trampolines up trees, on roofs. It's like a large sail, basically, and notwithstanding that they're quite heavy, 140-kilometre gusts can pick one of those things up. It's like a bowling ball. It'll take out everything in its path.
In Kilburnie, Fire Station Officer Clark Townsley says staff were working hard to secure roofing iron in heavy winds, and it was fortunate nobody was injured.
We've had loose roofing iron coming loose from the top of the warehouse precinct, and we've had to close off the car parking area as a precaution and had to do some evacuations around the childcare centre.
More than 10,000 properties in areas from New Plymouth and Whanganui to Palmerston North, Masterton and Taihape are facing a night without power. Powerco's Network Operations Manager Phil Marsh says contractors are out and trying to fix lines, but the storm is making things very difficult.
I fear that there will be people off without power. We are battling to get as many on as we can, so it's normal that we will have a lower amount of crews overnight. They respond to emergencies, and as soon as first light comes around, we have teams back on the road again.
Phil Marsh says some people may be waiting until the weekend when the weather is expected to improve. I te whanganui a tara, mo te otaka o te ahi ko Jacob McSweeney, tēnei.
Moving north, the Napier-Taupo highway is closed. We'll be back there later. The desert road is closed and the ski town of Ohakune is cut off after a dumping of snow described as the heaviest seen there in more than 20 years. Sarah Robson has more.
Tom O'Sullivan and his family have been holidaying near Ohakune. They'd planned to head up Mount Ruapehu to see the snow, but this morning the snow came to them.
Well, obviously all the fields and that are shut. But yeah, it looks amazing. But yeah, unfortunately, there won't be a lot of skiing being done today.
Tom O'Sullivan said earlier today that they were reasonably well prepared for the freezing weather, but power outages had the potential to cause problems.
We've got plenty of food, but the only problem that we were staying, the Airbnb place we're staying at, has only got hasn't got a log burner. It's only gas fire and electricity. So, and the power went out about an hour and a half ago. So it could start to get cold pretty soon.
In Ohakune itself, for much of the afternoon, the library and the local pub, the Powder Keg, were the only places in town with backup generators, offering two very different options for staying warm. RNZ reporter Sharon Brett Kelly is holidaying there and says some people are already making the most of the conditions.
Just white everywhere. It's beautiful and silent, and snow is covering the roof. There's about at least 30 centimetres of snow. People are just out on the streets. I saw one snowboarder on top of the roof of the house snowboarding off. He just fell onto the ground. when you go down the streets, there's people snowboarding, people being towed by cars on their snowboards, having a bit of fun out in the snow.
With major roads around the Central Plateau closed, getting anywhere was going to be tricky. Ruapehu District Mayor John Cameron says it's one of the heaviest snowfalls he's seen in the more than 20 years he's been in the area.
If we walk outside, even on the road here, the snow would be just about up to your calves. So that's certainly the deepest we've seen for a long, long time.
Up on the mountain itself, both Whakapapa and Turoa ski fields were closed because of the blizzard conditions and avalanche risk. The Chief Executive, Ross Copeland, says staff have been carrying out controlled explosions to break up large, dangerous snowdrifts. He says they've been working in challenging conditions to groom the snow before expected good weather at the weekend.
It's all happening, massive snowfall, and I think I saw some Ohakune locals this morning posting that it was the biggest dump in town since 2001. Our national park team reported that we had 40 centimetres of fresh snow on the ground down there, so they're just trying to dig buses out of the snow and get things organised.
Snow and ice closed the Napier-Taupo road, leaving motorists and truck drivers stranded. Earlier today, there were 9 truckies hunkering down at the Rangataiki Tavern, about 40 kilometres from Taupo. One of the tavern's owners, Marion Klaus, said earlier today they weren't going anywhere fast.
The sun was trying to come out, but it's still snowing, but there's probably 3 or 4 inches of snow. We're 40 k's from Taupo, but further down it's quite bad.
Marianne Klaus says they are pretty self-sufficient and the power is on, but they do have a backup generator so they could carry on serving up hot soup to the drivers. At the Napier end of the road, about 20 people were rescued from their vehicles. Ian McDonald from Hawke's Bay Civil Defence says everybody who wanted to leave their vehicles has been evacuated and brought back to Bayview, near Napier.
NZT are hoping that they will be able to get some of the vehicles out today if they can do some work on the road. So everybody that needs to be evacuated has been evacuated. There's a few truck drivers that have decided to stay with their vehicles. But yeah, everybody's fine.
In Rotorua, snow fell downtown in what locals say is a very rare event. It didn't settle in the town centre, but the outskirts of the city and higher areas had more than a dusting. Jules works at Capers Cafe and says the entire cafe emptied out as people enjoyed the spectacle.
The whole front of our shop is glass, and I looked out and I seen snow and it was falling. I was like, oh my gosh, I was mid-serving someone and I was like, oh my gosh, it's snowing. And she turned around, she had 2 kids with her, and then everyone sort of all got up and started running to the door to go out and have a look and see how all the snow was falling on the cars and the road. It was really cool. Roads
around the central and lower North Island are expected to remain closed for some time yet. Mō te hōtaka o te ahi ahi, ko Sarah Robson, aho.
Let's head to Dunedin now. As the America's Cup did today, it was chilly there, but as was the case in Christchurch, Wellington and Auckland, what was lacking from the heat of the sun had plentiful compensation in terms of the crowds who braved the cold to express something very warm. Thousands of fans were there, a pretty striking message of support on such a cold day. And our Otago Southland reporter Lydia Anderson was among them for the final Welcome Home parade.
It wouldn't be a Dunedin parade without the City of Dunedin Pipe Band leading the way. Drummer Nigel Constable says spearheading a yachting parade makes a change from the usual rugby fare.
This is a bit different. It's something that doesn't come around all the time, so it's quite exciting really.
Spectators didn't mind the cold, although many waited until the last minute to emerge from warm offices and flood onto the streets of the CBD. Emma Smith from Cromwell says having the parade in Dunedin means a lot.
Oh, it's huge because it's always up north and it's good to see them come down south for once. So it's pretty good. I'm stoked for that.
One sailor called Inky reckons bringing the parade south raises the profile of local yacht clubs.
Especially for Dunedin, there are some very active yacht clubs here, but no one really thinks of Dunedin for sailing. They'll think Auckland, they'll think Wellington, but even Christchurch and Littleton, no one really thinks there's actually sailors there on the water.
The team were given a rousing welcome as they stepped onto a stage in the Octagon, holding the old mug high.
Let's hear it for them! Yes! Yo, Beauty, bring me that.
Team Chief Executive Grant Dalton expressing his gratitude.
Thank you. You are amazing.
He says the cold weather hasn't dampened the team's spirits in the slightest.
If it's cold and almost if it's bleak, it means the people that are there for the right, they're there because they really want to be there, and so we get that, and it means a huge amount to us.
Dalton says the team are still running on adrenaline.
I mean, we're still on a high from winning the Cup. I mean, really the big planning for us next is the full regional tour, which will take weeks. So we're just looking forward to Dunedin today, and well, I don't know, we're going to come down with a thud eventually, but it hasn't happened yet.
And while they might be forgiven for wanting some time off, Grant Dalton says the work won't stop once they get back to Auckland.
Well, some of the guys will get a rest, but, for me and others, we've really got to crack on pretty much and trying to work our way through this. And we've already had initial talks with government and with Auckland Council in this case. In the end, we've got to put on a world-class event, and we have to also defend the Cup as well. I mean, and they're quite separate in some ways, so it's a lot to organise.
Grant Dalton says the full regional tour of yacht clubs will take place later this year, perhaps when the weather is a little warmer. In Dunedin for Checkpoint, Lydia Anderson.
And we will be back looking at things weather later in the programme. Over the past fortnight, Checkpoint's begun a series on climate change, the costs, the consequences and our preparedness to respond. Tonight, if you live in an area that may be affected by climate change, and there are plenty of them, we have a warning for you. We're returning to the Bay of Plenty where a precedent may be about to be set for how councils and the governments can deal with you. Councils and the government can deal with you. Around 20 homeowners in Matata face being forced out of their homes unless they take a voluntary retreat. Payout offer, voluntary. The residents say the payout offers are insulting and they'll fight to the bitter end. Zach Fleming and our cameraman Bradley White report from Matata.
We've had 12 years of this shit.
What's happened to the do unto others is you'd have that unto yourself, because this is despicable what is going on here.
It's wrong what they're doing to us.
I used to have a lot of respect for our local council. Now I have no respect for our local council.
It's council versus community on Clem Elliott Drive in Matata.
As far as I'm concerned, the whole lot should be put up against a wall and shot with a ball of their own shit.
The problem, boiled down, is that in 2005, a period of heavy rain brought a massive debris flow down the hill at the entrance to Matata. And when we're talking debris, we're talking boulders the size of cars. And that debris flow damaged houses, but the council 12 years ago decided the risk of it happening again was low and let residents rebuild. Now though, they've changed their mind and say the risk is actually high, and they're asking all those people who rebuilt their lives and rebuilt their houses to leave. But the residents aren't buying it. They say the risk isn't high and they're not leaving.
We just want to be left alone and get on with our lives. We're not asking for much. We don't want anything from the council.
Greg Fahey might not want anything from the Whakatane District Council, but the council wants him and all of his neighbours to leave. There is undoubtedly a risk a debris flow like 2005 could happen again, but Jared Stuckey doesn't believe the risk is as high as the council makes it out to be.
When I went to get insurance 12 months ago, they at the insurance company said I was, well, #1 red zone, which has since been, it's bullshit, but that's fine. They can call it #1 red zone. Other insurance companies haven't worried about insuring it.
So your house is insured?
It is fully insured.
Tawai Thatcher moved to Matata from the Gold Coast in June 2015. She says she was told, and the LIM report said, low risk.
And then about August, they told us, we got some mail and said there's going to be a voluntary retreat. And okay,
June 2015, they said low risk, and then 2 months later, knock on the door, hey TY, can you please get out?
Yeah, I think we got mail rather than a knock on the door, and voluntary retreat. Like, well, what does this mean? So
they told you that in a letter. They didn't even knock on your door.
No, they didn't knock on my door. No, they didn't knock on my door. It was just in the mail.
The letter said the council would buy their homes, but the offer was what the homes are worth now that they're considered dangerous.
Where can we go? Because the house prices have gone up. What we put into this would only be a deposit now, and then we'll be going back to a big mortgage again.
If this house was sitting anywhere other than Clem Elliott Street in Matata, it's an $900,000 home on the beach.
But sitting in Clem Elliott Street in Matata, how much is it worth now?
Well, they've got a value on it of $280,000. So, I mean, as I said to you last week, that's ludicrous. It's insane where they get the valuations from.
Grant Wilkins, he says the offer's unfair because nobody would even be there if the Whakatane District Council nearly a decade ago hadn't given the all-clear to rebuild. But Mayor Tony Bond says council has no legal obligation to compensate for value lost, so it won't.
We are trying to be as fair as possible in the voluntary retreat package, and I think that is incorrect to say that they are being offered half of their value. I actually think that we're doing the fairest possible system. We had no legal obligation. We could just walk away and say, change of plan, everybody's got to go, hard luck. We're not like that. We do feel for the people.
So issue 1, the residents think the buyout offers are too low. Issue 2, the voluntary involuntary retreat. Whenever it's used in Clem Elliott Drive, it's in quotes and followed by an eye roll.
Any correspondence with council, Whakatane, there's always been, whether it be through letter or conversation, the threat of existing use rights being taken off us via this plan to do with regional council.
Is that a direct threat or an implied threat?
It's well worded on their part, so I suggest you could take it either way, depending on how you want to read it.
So that gives them plausible deniability, but you, as far as you're concerned, it's a threat.
I would definitely deem it as being a threat, yeah. So, I mean, at the end of the day, Zach, if people want to stay here, they should have the right to stay here. They should be able to get on with their lives and be left alone.
And it seems Grant was right all along. Mayor Tony Bond says last week council passed a resolution to head forward with a land use rights change.
That will mean that once it goes through, there'll be submissions called, and the submissions will be in front of independent direct commissioners.
And that could or will result in the changing of land use rights?
More than likely it will result in the change.
And we're going to be used as guinea pigs for the rest of the coastal people in New Zealand to kick them off the land with the global warming and all this sort of stuff. This is not just about the people in Matatā.
The rest of New Zealand need to start waking up, because when they start going around different parts of the coast and saying it's a cheaper option to kick you out, once that law goes through, that's it. And I think it should be rejected, and they should be told to piss off.
Whether or not that'll actually happen, it could. Mayor Bond acknowledges Matatā will set a precedent.
This is going to be a precedent for New Zealand, and I didn't want our council to be the first one off the block. We've got climate change happening throughout, and you just have to go around New Zealand and you've got some big problems. And with climate change, yes, there are going to be places in New Zealand which are going to be in the same situation, unfortunately, in the future.
So if you're in a home at risk of coastal inundation or landslides or whatever, what's happening in Matatā could affect you. And you really don't have to go far to find people that might be affected, which is issue 3. 30 kilometres away in Ohope, dozens of homes are at high risk of landslides, but residents there are, for now at least, being allowed to stay put. On Clem Elliott Drive, Tāwai Thatcher and others see that as a double standard.
I feel as though we've been picked on, and I really don't think it's because of the mitigation risk, because I think Ohope West End is more of a risk because they're on the top of the list.
Mayor Bond sees it differently.
The experts are saying they can mitigate, and I'm not an engineer, whereas we're getting expertise from expert engineers. And yes, they can be challenged. They can be challenged by other engineers, but you've got to take, in the end, you've got to take professional advice. And that's what the advice is. They can mitigate in those areas, and we cannot mitigate in Matatā.
The Bay of Plenty Regional Council says it's been expecting an application from the Whakatane District Council for a plan change for some time, and it's ready to expedite planning decisions to give certainty to the Matatā community as quickly as possible. On Clem Elliott Drive, though, there's already certainty.
I'm not going anywhere.
They're considering legal action. For Checkpoint, Zach Fleming.
29 minutes past 5. The government is being warned of a potential crisis in mental health as community workers leave for higher pay in the aged care and disability sectors. Etu and the PSA filed an equal pay claim with the Employment Relations Authority last month after community mental health workers were left out of the government's $2 billion pay equity settlement for workers in the aged care and disability sector. Those working in that sector received a pay rise last week. People who were on the minimum wage of $15.75, for example, are now earning $19, with similar increases across all bands. as they head higher. And as Michelle Cook reports, some mental health workers are earning far less than that.
My day is constant reassurance. You know, my clients have up to 30, 40 different delusions a day that they believe are very real.
Joshua Gardner loves his work, but he's seriously considering following his colleagues who have already quit their jobs in mental health and secured positions in aged care. The Christchurch man works with clients who have schizophrenia and other mental illnesses.
I'm their teacher, I'm their worker, I'm their friend, a whole lot. You know, I've got to look out for them when they're unwell, I've got to spot triggers, and I've got to deal with it, and it's all one-on-one support.
All that for just $17 an hour.
There's just no incentive for $17 an hour to work in mental health.
With 2 Level 4 certificates in human services and mental health and addictions, Joshua Gardner would be paid $23.50 an hour if he worked in the aged care and disability sector.
There's actually people through other agencies that have already left. People are doing it because they have to, because we're not living a living wage. And an extra $5 an hour is huge to a paycheck.
Mr. Gardner often works 96 hours a fortnight. He'd earn another $13,728 a year if he did the same hours in aged care. Unions E2 and the Public Service Association and sector representatives are urging the government to consider the claim with urgency and warn of a crisis in the mental health sector if they don't. Sally Pitts-Brown is the CEO of Pathways, which provides a range of community-based mental health services. She says her staff work in stressful conditions and now have more options to work elsewhere for significantly more pay.
I think we are absolutely heading into a crisis. The impact of the settlement on the other sectors has had a huge impact, and none of us understand why mental health and addictions was excluded, because it was intentionally in the settlement and then it got excluded.
Ms. Pitts-Brown says while it's early days and none of her staff have left just yet, they've indicated they're considering doing so.
Money's tight and money's really, really important. And, you know, particularly for our staff who live in Auckland, where there are already all the additional challenges, it's creating a real dilemma for them. What we are already seeing is an impact on our ability to recruit.
The Ministry of Health says mental health workers were excluded after all settlement parties agreed. While it is not party to the claim, it's involved in negotiations after being invited by the unions and employers to participate. E2 Assistant National Secretary John Ryle estimates between 3,000 and 4,000 people are affected by the claim, which asks for exactly the same pay, no more, no less, than what those in the aged care and disability sector now receive. He says the union only agreed to exclude mental health workers as they felt they had no choice in the decision. He says the government has a responsibility to financially contribute towards this claim. However, Mr. Ryle is afraid the claim won't be settled before the election and warns of what could happen if it isn't.
This matter can't be left for months to drag on. Something needs to be done about it quickly, because the mental health service is already in crisis, and this is going to add further to it.
The Employment Relations Authority said in a statement that it couldn't comment on the progress of specific cases. However, it said if the matter isn't resolved in mediation, then an authority member would set an investigation meeting, which are generally set 3 or more months in advance and take 3 months to complete.
The decision about whether a matter is granted urgency is up to the authority member. If they decide it is necessary, they can reduce any of the timeframes mentioned above. However, it is extremely unlikely a matter of this complexity would be dealt with quickly.
With a family to care for, community mental health worker Joshua Gardner says he can't ignore an extra $10,000 or more a year and will have to leave if a settlement isn't reached soon. And he warns he won't be the only one to do so.
I feel that my clients are going to be left behind and their needs will not be met at all. I can go get another job, you know, and it's the clients and the clients' families that are going to be let down.
For Checkpoint, Michelle Cook.
The Minister of Health, Jonathan Coleman, declined to be interviewed. His office said he could not comment on the negotiations which are in the early stages. Mr Coleman did not respond to our repeated requests to discuss why community health workers were excluded from the care and support workers settlement, or concerns about an impending crisis in mental health if large numbers of workers leave for higher paid jobs in other sectors. Checkpoint on RNZ. Thank you for being with us. Coming up, a man who took millions of dollars in backhanders in a sophisticated pokie machine fraud is jailed for 4.5 years. And a mining company strikes gold near Paeroa, but not everyone is happy about it. Nona next with business news, but Katrina late even by our standards with the RNZ headlines.
It's not too bad, 5:35. Snow has fallen as far north as Rotorua as the powerful storm lashes the lower and central North Island. The central North Island towns of Raitahi and Ohakune are cut off with heavy snow closing highways in the region. Earlier, up to 20 motorists had to be evacuated from the Napier-Taupo road after snow closed the highway. The Emergency Operations Centre has been activated in the Manawatu and Whanganui regions. The Ruapehu, Tararua and Manawatu district councils have also activated their emergency centres. In Wairarapa, heavy rain has been falling all day. Farms and roads are flooded and river levels are dangerously high. It's feared flooding and road closures could soon isolate the town of Martinborough. Power is out to more than 10,000 homes. The outages stretch from pockets in the Hutt Valley and some small areas north of Wellington through to Manawatu, Whanganui and into Taranaki, as well as Wairarapa and the central North Island. There are warnings that due to the appalling conditions, some people may have to wait until tomorrow to be reconnected. And the storm is bringing snow to areas that very rarely see it. There has been snow in Rotorua and in the Mamaku Ranges to the city's west. The Takapau Plains and Central Hawke's Bay have also had an unusual dumping. In other news, community groups say the high-quality gold found by a mining company in Paeroa should stay in the ground where it belongs. New Talisman Gold Mines, which has been prospecting at Karangahake Gorge, says it's found more than 300,000 ounces of high-quality gold at a zone called Dubbo. And a strong 6.7 magnitude earthquake has struck off Papua New Guinea. No tsunami alert has been issued and there are no immediate reports of damage. Those are headlines. I'm back at 6.
Thanks so much, Katrina. Let's turn to business with Nona, who is on the other side of me in the studio. Nice to see you, Nona. Property prices, house prices, slightly conflicting story, right? Because up, strong growth in the regions, down in Auckland. What can you tell us?
Well, overall, the national price rose slightly because we did have that fall in Auckland and the rise in the regions. Some regions were really strong, notably the Bay of Plenty, Manawatu, Whanganui and Tasman districts. Interestingly, the prices fell in Auckland over the month before. So 0.6% fall. It's not a huge fall, but it's still a fall. And in contrast...
And this over a month?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
In contrast, a 9% gain in the regions.
Yeah.
So overall, we're talking about a tale of two stories, two different situations with house prices. In Auckland, it's not surprising that prices have fallen because it's a mix of where the prices are down. Low value houses, that's where you've seen a sort of a dip. And that's partly because of the loan restrictions by the bank. Yeah,
exactly.
Now, as a result of that, people who are first-time home buyers are having a hard time getting financing. They need that big deposit. And also banks are a little bit reluctant to lend because of debt and the ability for these new homeowners to service those debts if interest rates rise. And on the other side of it, investors who would normally buy these low-value properties are staying away. A 40% down payment is one reason. And again, the banks are a little bit reluctant to lend. And so we're seeing some changes in the market.
So perversely, for people trying to enter the property market, just at the time when actually prices at the end of the market where you would enter as a first home buyer, it's getting tougher to get the money. And
yeah, even if you've got the deposit together, the banks are like, well, can you afford a house at $600,000?
You know what, we're going to try and talk to the banks about this.
Yeah, it's a difficult situation, but the banks have a responsibility, you know, to lend to people who can service debt.
Yeah.
And a $600,000 loan isn't small.
No.
You know, so if you've got a limited income, you know, it's going to be a struggle. So it's difficult, but never mind that.
And when I say we're going to talk to the medics about this, we're also going to talk to Elvis and Lord Lucan, because they front with about the same frequency, I find. Thanks, Nona.
Well, good luck with that
Okay,
then, John.
thank you.
You might have to catch them when they're reporting their results that are
Okay.
really extra good or something.
Yeah, thanks.
Not that we've seen that recently. Okay, so now, interestingly, this change in house prices hasn't really translated into sentiment for consumers. We've seen the latest consumer sentiment confidence index is actually a little bit down, but still super high. So we moved from 127.8 to 125.
Right, and anything over 100 is
That's
is
still,
confident.
yeah, exactly.
Okay. And is there a regional breakdown here, or is this just nationwide?
Well,
This is just a nationwide
in fact,
figure,
the Auckland consumer confidence is still super high. And so it hasn't really put any kind of damper on the optimism for households. Although they're not buying the big ticket items, there is a feeling in the market that, hey, wages will rise because of the pressures out there in the market. So, you know, people are expecting to get a bigger pay packet, and that might be helping consumer confidence. It sure seems to be anyway. And plus, there's an election year, and you know, the national government has offered some tax breaks. So and the labor
families package.
The families package, exactly. So overall, I guess we're seeing a bit of a buoyancy in the market. Yeah, and it's reflecting in our statistics.
Right. What did the other markets do today?
Well, it was a bit of a mixed bag there because Janet Yellen, who's the head of the U.S. Federal Reserve, gave some testimony and was a little less hawkish than the market was expecting. So that saw the dollar dip a little bit. That helped the New Zealand dollar. It was a bit stronger against the U.S. at 72.9, which is still pretty strong, 94.7 Australian and 56.5 British pence. And the Asian markets loved this. So that saw all of the markets rise across the board in the region. And our top 50 index rose about 1/3% by 25 points to 7,611.
Nona Feltzer, thank you very much indeed. A man who took millions of dollars in backhanders in what a judge described as a, quote, sophisticated, end quote, poking machine fraud has been jailed for 4.5 years. Marlborough racing personality Michael O'Brien was sentenced in the High Court in Wellington today after being found guilty of 5 charges of obtaining by deception. A second man, Kevin Coffey, was sentenced to 12 months home detention after being found guilty of 1 charge of obtaining by deception. Our court reporter, Anne-Marie May, filed this report.
Between 2010 and 2013, Michael O'Brien was effectively the operator of the Blenheim-based gaming machine society, the Bluegrass Trust, but hid his involvement from the Department of Internal Affairs, which regulates the gaming industry. The department considered he was unsuitable for such a position as a result of his involvement in an earlier trust which had also been investigated. The Crown Prosecutor Grant Burston said O'Brien paid money to racing clubs to benefit himself, and the clubs felt they had no choice but to pay him 1/3 of what they received if they were to get any pokey grant funding.
The millions of grant funding paid by the racing clubs back to Michael O'Brien went to benefit him personally and deprived the racing clubs and other community organisations of much needed funding. Mr. O'Brien's offending was selfish and greedy.
O'Brien's lawyer Bruce Squire QC said there was no evidence his client lived a lavish lifestyle as a result of his offending. He said numerous references provided to the court for sentencing referred to his client's community involvement.
A man who was generous with his time and efforts in supporting the community activities in which he has become involved. And I add to that the evidence that you heard at trial that he was also a man who was generous with giving away funds to friends and acquaintances who fell on hard times.
Mr Squire said O'Brien now recognised he had a gambling addiction which may have contributed to his offending, and he had given up training horses to remove himself from temptation. He asked Justice Dobson to grant various sentence discounts which would have made O'Brien eligible for home detention, but the judge refused, saying O'Brien's deceit struck at the heart of gambling regulation.
You distanced yourself from the organisation of the trust. You represented your father as acting in your place by forging his signature on relevant documents and sending emails purporting to come from him. It was relatively sophisticated of deceiving those who were entitled to rely on the integrity of the applicants.
Kevin Coffey's lawyer also sought home detention for her client, saying he played a lesser role in the offending. Justice Dobson agreed, but highlighted the significance of Coffey's previous employment as a gambling inspector.
Your identity as a director was material, at least in an implicit sense, for the DIA, because even if only subconsciously, the officers would have taken a measure of comfort from your relevant experience in the sector and also your earlier experience as a DIA compliance officer.
A third man, Paul Max, will be sentenced later this month for his involvement in the fraud. In Wellington for Checkpoint, Anne-Marie May.
Let's head to the West Coast, which is to get a new mining research institute and improve roads under the government's Regional Action Plan announced today. The $36.8 million economic development plan comes after a study last year found there was scope for the West Coast to grow its economy and diversify its industries. Logan Church reports.
The $36.8 million action plan, announced in Hokitika this morning, promises investment in infrastructure, as well as tourism, horticulture and digital technology. Epic Westport is a business and technology hub, and its co-founder, Natasha Barnes-Delica, says the plan is a much-needed starting point for the West Coast's economy to diversify.
It's an opportunity for the coast to show what we can do with this money. Hopefully over the next year or two, investment and focus in this area will increase, but it is a challenge for people now to kick that plan into action.
Under the initiative, the government will invest $1 million in a digital action plan, with the aim of giving the region's technology sector a kickstart. Ms Barnes-Delica says it's time the region seriously looked at high-growth industries, such as ICT, given the advantages it can offer.
The West Coast provides an incredible lifestyle, coupled with lower overheads of maintaining a home and starting a business. It actually provides a really amazing competitive advantage compared to setting up in say, Auckland or Wellington.
There's also nearly $20 million for transport upgrades, as well as future-proofing the Franz Josef Glacier from flooding and earthquakes. $125,000 will also be spent on research into whether a sustainable whitebait fishery is viable. The Associate Minister for Primary Industries, Louise Upston, says she hopes some of the initiatives will grow to provide future employment opportunities. The Bulla District Mayor, Gary Howard, says it's also important that the West Coast looks to develop industries outside of its traditional bread and butter, coal mining.
It's not all just about mining. There's a big emphasis on tourism, and we're really keen on getting more people with IT, with lifestyle, and actually being able to have and facilitate more of that is really important, and the government support and Taipei Polytech support for that is really good.
But the government isn't giving up on mining. It's investing in a new regional mining research institute, which will be located in Greymouth. The Grey District Mayor, Tony Cockshawn, says the facility will help the region's mining move away from coal.
What they're basically doing is putting $11 million in over 4 years, and that'll set up the ability to be able to look at the areas around the whole of New Zealand that have that extra rare earth mineral potential. That is really good.
However, not everyone thinks the plan is a good idea. Labour's West Coast Tasman MP, Damien O'Connor, says it has no vision and has excluded many major industries, including dairying and engineering. The action plan will be overseen by a governance group, but no exact start date has been set for any of the projects. For Checkpoint, call Logan Church, Tēnei.
The excellent people at Christchurch Transport Operations Centre, who do such a superb job of updating us on roads in the South Island, have just sent out their latest advisory. Nothing particularly new here, except for the fact that Kaikoura is completely cut off from the outside world unless you can fly in, but I don't even think it's the weather for that. So State Highway 1, which is open some of the time, essentially Friday to Monday during the daylight hours, is closed. And the inland route 70, which we've been looking at a bit, that is the long and winding road in round the back through farmland, is also closed because of snow. So if you are wanting to get in overland to Kaikoura, you simply can't at the moment. State Highway 73 Springfield to Arthur's Pass, which is of course Porter's Pass is closed. Next up, 10 o'clock on Friday morning. So some pretty major closures. Kaikoura effectively cut off. We'd love to hear from you if you are stuck somewhere in snow or the road is closed unexpectedly where you are. Text us is probably the best thing to do if you have cell phone coverage, 2101. And if you're stuck in abysmal traffic or appalling weather, text us and we'll give you a call. It's coming up, well, it's just gone 11 minutes to 6 on Checkpoint. Let's go from the west coast to Paeroa, a mining company that has found outstanding quality gold near Paeroa is facing a battle to mine it commercially. New Talisman Gold Mines has been prospecting at the Karangahake Gorge and has found over 300,000 ounces of high quality gold in one of its sites called Dubbo. Jessie Chang has more.
The Karangahake Gorge is well known for its beautiful scenery and its walks, but New Talisman Gold Mine says it also holds an outstanding quality of gold in its century-old mine. Its Chief Operating Officer, Wayne Scholes, says they want to begin extracting small amounts of it early next year.
We've been prospecting and analysed a lot of historic data, which it provides evidence that the deposit extends far below where we are now, and at really excellent gold grades.
But the Mayor of the Hauraki District Council, John Campbell, says they've known there's been quality gold there for a long time.
I'm not surprised because we've known that for many, many years that there is quite significant still resources in there that was left behind by the mining. They've known that. What they're doing here is just really proving that.
Mr Trigidja says New Talisman Gold Mines have consents for bulk sampling at the gorge, which allows them to take 20,000 cubic metres of ore each year. He says that's not commercial mining, and there would be a lot of opposition from the community if the company were to pursue a mining licence. However, Green Party MP Catherine Delahunty says community groups around the country, not just in Karangahake, are strongly opposed to any extracting of resources on conservation land.
It's a small company that is pretty desperate to get some more investors. So they're spinning the story as the greatest thing that's ever happened without mentioning the absolute national opposition to mining on conservation land. So really bulk sampling is mining and it should not be happening.
Protect Karangahake, a group formed against New Talisman Gold Mines after the company gained permission to take gold, says locals are already having to share some tracks with security guards and trucks carrying supplies. The chairman of the group, Duncan Shearer, says it's vital that the area, which is special to many people, is protected.
We see no benefit to our local community who are gaining jobs and economic employment from tourism activities now. They're all put at risk by a mining operation which threatens the enjoyment of those very tourists. So we see no place in Karangahake for mining.
Mr Scholes says while some locals are unhappy with their plans to extract gold, they've also had positive responses from many people. For Checkpoint, Ko Jessie Chang, Aho.
It's 8 minutes to 6. The greatest witch hunt in political history. That's how US President Donald Trump has described the controversy swirling around him and his eldest son. Donald Trump Jr. has released emails revealing he met with a Russian lawyer last year, said to have information from the Kremlin damaging to his father's presidential rival, Hillary Clinton. It all comes as the president's nominee to become the next director of the FBI, Christopher Wray, promised to pursue justice impartially in regard to the investigation into Russian meddling in the US election and potential links with the Trump election campaign. With more on this story, here's the BBC's Gavin Hewitt.
Tonight, we have Donald Trump Jr.
Donald Trump's son out defending himself after revelations from emails that last year he met a Russian lawyer who he believed would offer him incriminating information on Hillary Clinton.
In retrospect, I probably would have done things a little differently. Again, this is before the Russia mania. This is before they were building it up in the press. For me, this was opposition research.
In his interview, Donald Trump Jr. said he hadn't referred the meeting to his father.
It was such a nothing. There was nothing to tell. I mean, I wouldn't have even remembered it until you start scouring through the stuff. It was literally just a wasted 20 minutes, which was a shame.
President Trump was quick to praise his son's television performance, tweeting that Donald Jr. was open, transparent, and innocent. This is the greatest witch hunt in political history. Sad, he said. So who are the key players involved in the meeting last year? The initial approach to Donald Trump Jr. about a potential Russian meeting came from Rob Goldston, a British publicist. He helped schedule the appointment with Natalia Veselnitskaya, a Russian lawyer. Also in the room was Paul Manafort, Trump's campaign manager, and Jared Kushner, Trump's son-in-law, a clear sign they thought the meeting would be significant.
The email shows an intent and a desire to have a foreign government interfere in the American election of the president, asking for that kind of assistance, if that was the assumption of the meeting. That, in and of itself, can be a crime.
The White House has been active, pointing out that there has been no illegality, no law broken, no sensitive information exchanged, but that doesn't mean there are no risks in all of this for the Trump administration. In this atmosphere of political crisis, focus turned towards Capitol Hill and the confirmation hearings for the new director of the FBI. He was asked whether he agreed with the president that the investigation by Special Counsel Mueller into Russian meddling in last year's election amounted to a witch hunt.
Do you believe that, in light of the Don Jr. email and other allegations, that this whole thing about Trump campaign in Russia is a witch hunt? Is that a fair description of what we're all dealing with in America?
Well, Senator, I can't speak to the basis for those comments. I can tell you that my experience with Director
I'm
Mueller...
asking you, as the future FBI director, do you consider this endeavor a witch hunt?
I do not consider Director Mueller to be on a witch hunt.
What do you think he wants? In an interview with the Christian Broadcasting Network today, President Trump tried to refocus attention back onto his legislative agenda and away from the questions about Russia, so preoccupying his administration.
That's the BBC's Gavin Hewitt. One of the biggest icebergs on record is now drifting in the Southern Ocean off Antarctica. Although to call it big is a bit of an understatement, really. It's roughly 6,000 square kilometres. That's about 6 times the size of Auckland and is made up of 1 trillion tonnes of ice. It's broken away from the Larsen A ice shelf and is now adrift in the Weddell Sea. Scientists have been tracking the crack in the ice shelf for more than a decade and warned in June that the section was hanging by a thread. With more, here's the ABC's David Cody.
The iceberg that was part of the Larsen C ice shelf is floating free. Professor Adrian Luckman is from Swansea University in the UK.
The rift that caused the calving has been there in all of the satellite imagery that I've seen. It was clearly well established in the 1980s, so it's been something that's been sitting there waiting to happen all that time.
The process, known as calving, happened sometime between Monday and Wednesday. The progress of the 200-kilometre-long crack has been monitored via satellite images and from the air. A crew from the British Antarctic Survey flew over it in February. Scientists, including Professor Luckman, will now be tracking the iceberg.
So bits of it might remain around, and if they do, it's very cold there. They might be there for years or decades. But we have evidence from previous icebergs that have come from this area that they are able to drift away northwards towards South America, but probably they're not going to get that far, and they're probably not going to be that much of a danger to shipping.
Because it was attached to an ice shelf, the chunk of ice was already floating. That means it won't cause sea levels to rise, but it reduces the size of the Larsen C ice shelf by more than 12%. Scientists warn if the rest of the ice shelf collapses, the glacier that sits behind it could dump more ice into the sea. Edward King is a geophysicist at the British Antarctic Survey.
If you look at all the ice in Antarctica, you're talking about many metres of sea level rise potential. But we're not talking tomorrow. We're not talking next year. It'll be a process that will take time. But we think that in places that process has started.
He says temperatures in the area around the Larsen C ice shelf have risen faster than elsewhere in Antarctica.
So it's a location that we need to monitor. And we need to be looking at the satellite data that have told us this iceberg has disappeared. We need to be getting boots on the ground to really understand what is happening in this quite fast-changing region.
Professor Luckman is urging caution before linking the creation of this iceberg to changes in the climate.
Climate warming won't have hindered the development of this rift. So if anything, it will have helped it along the way, but we have no direct evidence to say how that might have happened or whether it wouldn't have happened had we not been warming the climate. But we mustn't forget that there's much more significant things happening elsewhere in Antarctica. Antarctica is losing mass at an alarming rate, and that is a climate warming signal that is much more important than this iceberg.
And there was Antarctic researcher Adrian Luckman ending that report by David Cody. It's about 6:01. Just looking at road closures in the central North Island, it's quite extraordinary. Basically, it's very unusual to see this much of State Highway 1 closed. From the very top of the Desert Road, the northernmost point of the Desert Road, through Wairarapa to Taihape and all the way down to Hunterville is closed. That's a long stretch of State Highway 1. Around the back, underneath the mountain and up through the National Park side, that too is closed, and Whanganui to Raitihi is also closed. So basically, there's no way north or south through the centre of the North Island at the moment and overnight. Can we warmly recommend, if you are about to travel, Googling NZTA closed roads? Their website is excellent, and you can click on region by region for where you are, and they will tell you what is closed and what also is thoroughly unpleasant to drive on at the moment. After the news, we're going to be on the Napier Taupo, which is also closed. And we're going to be in Martinborough, the Wairarapa, which has got flooding, and we're also going to be in Wellington. Stay with us, but it's 6 o'clock.
RNZ News at 6. Kia ora, good evening. Ko Katrina Batten tēnei. More than 10,000 homes across the lower and central North Island are without power tonight after heavy winds, snow and rain caused chaos. There have been evacuations due to flooding in Wairarapa, warnings of flying objects in Wellington, and emergency centres have been activated throughout the North Island. Jacob McSweeney reports.
PowerCo says the number of cuts has been increasing all day, and it's now likely there will be some houses without electricity until as far away as the weekend. Homes in parts of New Plymouth, Whanganui, Palmerston North, Taihape and Masterton are all without power. As well as being without power, Ohakune is cut off by road, with all highways around the Central Plateau cut by snow. In Wairarapa, rain isn't expected to ease until the morning, and lengthy power cuts mean some communities are likely to lose cell phone and landline links as well. Following winds of up to 167 kilometres an hour in Wellington, the council has had to remind residents to tie down outdoor furniture because of the damage they can cause once picked up. Emergency centres have been opened in Manawatu, Whanganui, Ruapehu, Tararua and Horowhenua because of concerns about flooding. Ko Jacob McSweeney, tēnei.
A group of motorists who were stranded near the summit of the Napier Taupo Road ended up sheltering in a nearby house. Jim Andrew and his wife Marie own the Tarawera Cafe as well as the kiosk at Te Haroto at the summit. Mr Andrew says when he headed out before daybreak the weather was looking pretty good, but he says the snow set in about 8 or 9 o'clock.
It was, quite a decent dump. Got back to Te Haroto and found quite a few people in our house at Te Haroto. Yeah, so they're in there looking for a bit of shelter, had the fire going, and trucks and cars piled up here, right along the highway.
Jim Andrew, Hawke's Bay Civil Defence, says 20 motorists were rescued from their vehicles this afternoon. A few truck drivers opted to stay put and others were hunkering down at the Rangataiki Tavern at the Taupo end of the highway. The Napier Taupo Road will be closed until at least tomorrow morning. With State Highway 1 also closed by snow at Taihape, that means Taihape is cut off. In Wairarapa, farms and roads are flooded and river levels are dangerously high. It's feared flooding and road closures could soon isolate the town of Martinborough. In Masterton, residents had to be evacuated from some homes on Jones Place after stormwater drains couldn't handle the deluge there. A woman who lives in near Masterton says today's flooding is probably the biggest she has experienced since she moved to the area 12 years ago. Ronnie Percy lives on a lifestyle block about 7 kilometres north of the town towards Morrisville. She says it was raining all night.
Oh, we woke up to floods on the flats and the ducks were out there swimming and they'd come up from the bottom. And then, of course, this morning it was raining right through and heavily all night. So that was the cause of all that. It's probably the biggest floods we've had here.
Ronnie Percy. The Department of Internal Affairs is welcoming a 4.5-year jail term handed to a man found guilty of fraud over the distribution of pokie machine profits. Michael O'Brien, who's 58, was sentenced in the High Court in Wellington today after he was earlier found guilty of 5 charges of obtaining by deception. Here's our court reporter Anne-Marie May.
Michael O'Brien concealed his control of the Bluegrass Trust, which distributed pokie machine profits in Blenheim, because Internal Affairs, which regulates gambling, considered him an unsuitable person to be involved in such activities. The department's Gambling Compliance Director, Gareth Bostock, says the jail term sends a strong message over corrupt practices in the gambling sector. He says the investigation that led to O'Brien's arrest also led to the cancellation of 2 gambling societies' licences and removed a number of unsuitable people from working in societies or pubs with pokie machines. This is Anne-Marie May.
A local community group says high-quality gold found in the Karangahake Gorge between Paeroa and Waihi should stay in the ground where it belongs. New Talisman Gold Mines has found over 300,000 ounces of high-quality gold in one of its prospecting zones and says it will begin bulk sampling it early next year. But Protect Karangahake, which opposes mining in the gorge, says locals want operations to stop. Its chairperson, Duncan Shearer, says it will ruin the gorge for walkers and tourists.
We see no benefit to our local community who are gaining jobs and economic employment from tourism activities now. They're all put at risk by a mining operation which threatens the enjoyment of those very tourists. So we see no place in Karangahake for mining.
Duncan Shearer from Protect Karangahake. The American Secretary of State Rex Tillerson has ended talks with 4 Gulf countries on how to end a month-long rift with Qatar, saying there's no sign of any breakthrough. Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, Bahrain and Egypt opposed sanctions on Qatar last month, accusing it of financing extremist groups and allying with their arch-foe Iran. Doha denies the allegations. It's 6:05. The All Blacks prop Charlie Faumuina will fall 1 game short of becoming a Super Rugby centurion, despite being named in the starting lineup for his last game for the Blues in Tokyo this weekend. The 30-year-old will leave for the French club Toulouse at the end of the season. Saturday's game against the Sunwolves would have been his 100th if illness hadn't ruled him out of the Queensland Red games earlier this season. Former All Blacks loose forward Stephen Luatua will also be playing his last match for the Blues, having signed with the English club Bristol. The world's top women golfers are refusing to engage in politics ahead of the US Open, which tees off in New Jersey tomorrow at the Trump National Course, owned by the President Donald Trump. All the leading contenders, including New Zealand's Lydia Ko, have offered up the same pre-tournament message, saying they're there simply to play golf. Ko hasn't won a tournament in nearly 12 months, but has 7 top 10 finishes this year.
Those top 10 weeks, I feel like, a few rounds I've been able to put it all together, and I think that's what I've been, a little less consistent at this year compared to the, last year. And with anything, we're always trying to maintain and get better and get more consistent.
Lydia Ko. Formula One organisers are considering running the British Grand Prix on the streets of London. With Silverstone Racetrack giving up the right to host the UK's big race, organisers are interested in running F1 on London streets. That's the news.
Tonight on Nights, the artist Sosafina Andy on how the memories of her grandmother's house in tropical Samoa continue to inform her work in temperate New Zealand. Though it's not that temperate out there at the moment, Fergus Barrowman shares a few new jazz delights with us, while Our Changing World looks at the latest research on migraines and whether any of it might lead to an effective treatment one day. On Nights with me, Brian Crump, from after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
It's service weather through to midnight. Tomorrow, warnings and watches are enforced for heavy rain, snow and strong winds over central and eastern areas. Northland and Auckland showers, some heavy and possibly thundery, easing tomorrow morning. Waikato and Waitomo, also Coromandel, Bay of Plenty and the central high country. Periods of rain with snow above 400 metres at first, easing later tomorrow. For Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, periods of rain with snow above 600 metres at first, persistent with heavy falls and possible thunderstorms tomorrow. Taranaki to Wellington, Wairarapa and the Marlborough Sounds. Rain with heavy falls and snow above 600 metres at first, easing later today or early tomorrow. Severe southerly gales in exposed places easing from this evening. For the remainder of Marlborough, Canterbury, showers with snow above 400 metres at first, gradually easing. Nelson and Buller through to Fiordland, cloudy in Nelson today, otherwise fine. And Otago and Southland, isolated showers clearing later today. The Chatham Islands, a few showers with rain tomorrow. It's 6:08 and you're listening to Checkpoint.
Thank you very much, Katrina. A wild winter storm is lashing the central North Island. In fact, many parts of the country, cutting power to thousands, shutting roads and causing widespread flooding. In the Wairarapa, we're going there shortly. The Desert Road is closed. So too is State Highway 1 south of the Desert Road all the way through to Hunterville. It seems the ski town of Ohakune is cut off after a dumping of snow described as the heaviest seen there in more than 20 years. Snow even fell on the outskirts of Rotorua. Our reporter Sharon Brett-Kelly is in Ohakune on holiday. Sharon, but RNZ
Hello.
still gets you on the phone. How are you?
Oh, well, thanks, John.
good.
Yeah, I'm just peering out through a window now onto a field outside the little place that we're staying in, and it's covered with thick snow. It's beautiful.
Yeah, I bet it's beautiful. And it's a ski town and it's winter, so we should expect this. But we need to point out that these are levels not seen for more than a couple of decades.
Yeah, it was really interesting. We went for a walk along the street this morning. It was so lovely waking up and there was just, the flurries of snow. And it was that lovely light snow that you don't often get here, actually, in the central North Island. And one guy said to us in one of the ski shops, he said to us, this is like European snow. It's so light and fluffy. It was lovely. People were so excited about it. The people who work in the ski business, they're so excited. One guy said to us, it was the best day of his life.
Because this is going to mean a bumper season, isn't it, for them? The issue is people can't get in, right? You're completely cut off there.
We are completely cut off. People can't get in. We can't get out. There are lots of people driving around the town, sliding around the roads. But that's right. And we went into the library, which has become the emergency operations centre for this area of Ruapehu. And the woman there, the librarian, said she's had a really busy day because they're the main one in this area. And she said they're covering from Wairarapa through to Raitahi, Ohakune, right through to National Park, all around that area, which all those parts had lost power. So it's a busy time. And, yeah, these little towns are cut off, which is, it's not bad for us because we're having a lovely time here. But it can get serious. We ran into a midwife in the cafe this morning, and she was saying that there are 3 women just in Ohakune who are due to have their baby, which is okay. But if they run into difficulty, the clinic in Raitahi is closed, so they would have to go as far as Wanganui to the hospital.
And that road is closed.
That road is closed, that's right. And St John, I think they gave them some assurances that they'd probably be able to get through on one of the roads. But, it's pretty hairy round here.
Yeah, how cold is it?
It's not really cold, actually. You've got to put your layers on, but it's not that freezing cold. I haven't stepped out for a couple of hours. It's a lovely temperature. It's not like you've got to cover everything up, otherwise you'll get frostbite. Up the mountain, of course, is a different story, and apparently the avalanche level was at its most extreme today. They say it's not a big avalanche mountain, but they'll have to be doing some kind of explosion in the next few days just to make sure that it is safe for skiers, because they think it's probably going to open on Saturday morning. They're talking about a bluebird day, clear skies, sunny, for a big day on Saturday.
Magic. Sharon Brett-Kelly, who was on holiday, but Paul Thompson's just called and said that is now no longer an annual leave day. That counts as work. Enjoy yourself there. Thanks, Sharon.
Thanks,
Lovely to talk to you. 6:12 in Martinborough, in the southern Wairarapa, of course, has been flooding across farmland and surface flooding in town. There's a bit of farmland flooding in the southern Wairarapa, but the water doesn't often make it as high as it's been right in the middle of the township itself. The rain has been heavy and unceasing. Power is out, as we've been hearing, in some homes through the region. It's sweeping right across the lower North Island, the power outages. Now, Charlie Creswell's farm runs up to the Ponatahi Bridge, just on the outskirts of town.
It's got the feeling of a storm that's got that's a big system. You know, it's got a lot of intensity. It's not like a southerly front that'll come through and give us, you know, maybe an inch of rain in an afternoon and then be all over the next day. It feels dangerous. You know, it feels like slips will happen, bridges could be affected, not so much just with water over the top of them, but permanently with erosion problems. There could be stock losses. I hope there's no shorn sheep out there. I was at a friend's place this morning and they had lambs shorn, but they were still in the shed. They put them back in the shed, which is the right thing to do, obviously, when it's like this. And that'll be the danger for farmers. Obviously, it's a bit treacherous getting around on four-wheelers and things. You have to be very careful crossing swollen streams, or pretty much don't go there, basically. But, you know, some people try. Wouldn't be a good idea to do. And also access generally is difficult, and probably communication. A farmer's not going to hear his cell phone. Chances are he's probably not going to use it, and if he does, it's, you know, going to get wet, and communication's a problem.
Tony Creswell, whose farm runs up to the Punatahi Bridge, that is closed. Heavy flooding through there, and quite a lot of surface flooding throughout parts of the southern Wairarapa. We're just talking to Sharon Brett-Kelly. We're just looking at this NZTA map of closed roads in the central North Island. The Desert Road closed, parts of State Highway 1 south of the Desert Road closed all the way through to Hunterville, which is quite unusual. State Highway 4 north of Whanganui closed. In fact, Mount Ruapehu is basically encircled by closed roads. It's under house arrest. The mountain will be going nowhere. The Napier Taupo Highway is closed. In some places, people had to be rescued from their cars, and on the Napier Taupo, when it closes with traffic already on it, which of course often happens, one of the places the truckies wait up in is the Rangataiki Tavern. There's worse places to be stuck in a snowstorm. We called them, and Marion behind the bar answered the phone and told us who was there.
Mainly trucks, and they can't go nowhere. So they're just talking amongst themselves, and yeah.
What have you got on for lunch?
Well, a bit of everything and hot soup.
Yeah, what's your soup?
Pardon?
What's your soup today?
Homemade vegetable soup.
Oh yeah, that'd be good on a cold day. Can I have a chat to some of your customers? Is that all right? Have you got anyone there that I can talk to?
Yes, one guy here. Be very happy to talk to you.
Okay, what's his name?
I'm not sure what his name is, actually.
Thanks, Marion. Pass him over. Thank you. It's lovely to talk to you.
Yeah, hang on a minute.
Okay, thank you.
John Campbell wants to talk to you.
How you going, mate?
Yeah, good. How are you, young man?
Yeah, good.
Good. What's your first name?
Steve.
Nice to talk to you, Steve. And which way were you heading? Were you heading to the lake or to the coast?
Heading over to the coast, mate. She's a bit buggered over here.
Is she? What are you carrying?
Oh, I've got a load of timber on.
Oh, and you just can't go anywhere?
She's buggered. The road's bloody covered. She's about 3 inch, 4 inch thick.
Tell me that again. How deep is the snow?
She's about 3 or 4 inch thick where we are at the moment on the road.
Wow, so you just can't go anywhere?
No, it's buggered.
How long have you been driving that road for?
Oh, yeah, a couple of years. It's up there.
And have you ever seen it this bad before?
Oh, only once. Yeah, once last year. It was about as bad as this, but it's probably going to get worse.
Yeah, so what are you going to do? Just sit there?
Yep, sit here, eat the food and have a good laugh, I think.
Yeah, what food are you eating?
Oh, depends what's on the menu, don't it? Possum pie again. Possum pie, you reckon?
Possum pie, God. Can you pass me over to that cheeky bugger? Nice to talk to you, Steve.
Thank you, mate.
Yeah, thank you, bro.
Is that you there, young John?
Yeah, it is. It's nice to talk to you again. I think we spoke to you this time last year, didn't we?
Yeah, I was just pet possum pie then. But
Yeah. Are you actually serving possum pie? This is national radio, so you have to tell the truth. No one can take a joke on Radio New Zealand. You have to. Yeah, you have to speak the truth. Have you got some possum pie on there?
I'll go make some. Yeah.
Good man. So is this as bad as last year? Worse? About the same? What's it like?
Oh, no, that's not as bad. No. The 2006 one, I mean, no, not 2006, that August the 6th, yeah, that was quite a bad one.
What? Yeah.
About 2 foot deep. No, this one's sort of, 3 or 4 inches sort of job, but a bit of ice down the other end and 1 or 2 trucks looking around the other way. But, yeah.
Nice part of the world.
Oh, beautiful park, John.
Yeah.
That helicopter you got there and fly and have a look.
Yeah. No, we've got one on the roof. That's the kind of budget we've got. Hey, can you describe the scene outside now? If we were there and we looked out the window, what would we see?
Well, I got a few trucks parked out here, and I got the good old sign, good time pie, for a feed. I've got a porter petrol, not a petrol one. He's full of wine. That fella there, one of Porter's trucks.
We've got a TUI sign up here too.
There's a TUI sign up the top up there, which is beer job, and beautiful snowflakes coming down amongst it.
Oh, just snowing gently, is it?
Oh, beautiful, gentle. Yeah, you want to see it, mate.
Yeah, I wish I could. So you got nothing to do, those poor old truckers, you got nothing to do but sit there and eat your pies and chew the fat.
I'll get them to cut some wood, though. They don't know we're running out. They want to warm, we've got to cut a bit of wood.
Good. Oh, I wish I was there.
Oh, gee, John, you and your team, it'd be lovely.
Yeah, thank you. It's Duncan Klaus, where people, the Rangataiki pub, where people invariably end up when the road's closed. Some people weren't anywhere near habitation. They've had to be rescued. We think everyone is well and truly out now, but it's a long, slow process getting along the Napier Taupo when it's closed or the snow is heavy. Not as heavy as last year, we have to say, but still you can't drive on it. I have a sneaking suspicion some of those boys may not be able to drive for a wee while anyway. They may just have to quietly sleep off their afternoon surviving the weather. It's 6:19. Let's change subject entirely and go to London. 1 month on from the Grenfell Tower disaster, hundreds gathered in the shadow of the charred building to remember the victims. At least 80 people died in the fire in the West London housing estate. Many of the mourners were in tears as they filed past a wall plastered in tributes. Meanwhile, it's been revealed that the tower's residents were told to stay inside their flats for nearly 2 hours after the fire crews had been alerted to the blaze. This report from the ABC.
Hundreds gathered at a vigil in West London for the estimated 80 people who died 4 weeks ago when a blaze ripped through the Grenfell Tower. They lit candles, said prayers and shed tears. Among them Sue Caro from the Justice for Grenfell group.
Sue, tell us, why is this vigil important tonight?
Because it marks 4 weeks since the events that have caused so much tragedy and upset in this community. It's important that we recognise that people are still suffering and are still displaced and need to be reassured that they're still all in our thoughts, and that's why it's important.
It's now emerged that residents of Grenfell Tower were told to stay in their flats until 2:47 a.m, nearly 2 hours after the first call to the fire brigade. It was only then they were told to evacuate. Relatives of the victims, like Kareem Mulsihi, want answers.
Like within 15 minutes, the whole building caught fire. You know, after 2 hours, it's too late.
London's fire brigade says it's up to the police investigation and the public inquiry to look at the policy of staying put during a tower block fire. Meanwhile, the new leader of Chelsea and Kensington Council, Elizabeth Campbell, is already under fire before she started her new job, after she admitted she had never been in a tower block before. Outside a local meeting, she tried to clarify her comments.
This morning I was asked whether I had been to specific towers. I think there are 4 towers around here. I said I hadn't been to these towers, but of course I've been to blocks of flats. Of course I've met people.
Can I ask you when you're going to free up some of the hundreds of millions of pounds in reserves you have to buy social housing for the survivors of the tragedy?
As I said this morning, I absolutely commit that we will be using some of our reserves to do that. And we're also going to be talking to government and private developers.
Inside the meeting, angry survivors confronted the chief inspector investigating the fire on behalf of the police.
Some of us cannot sleep because when we sleep, we dream of this life all over again. Don't you have humanity? No! They haven't! There are people that are crying.
The new leader of the council has admitted it could be a generation before trust is rebuilt between residents and authorities.
That report from the ABC. Let's go across the Atlantic. It's a cliche, but a good rule of thumb when it comes to US politics, although it varies election by election, the degree to which this is true. America is blue around the outside. Remember, in America, blue is Democrat and red in the middle for Republicans. Cities like New York and Los Angeles are Democrat. The heartland sticks with the Republicans as a general rule. Washington, D.C. is all abuzz with the latest Trump-related scandals, the ins and outs of Donald Trump Jr.'s meeting with the Russian lawyer, etc., etc. But back in little towns like Norfolk, Nebraska, life goes on. excuse me, and the voters who supported Donald Trump at the polls tune out the fake news and the media bias. The BBC's Nick Bryant reports from deepest Nebraska.
He's on for a big ride. Hang in there, cowboy. There we go.
In the rollicking ride of the Trump presidency, you often wonder how long he'll stay on the horse. But no one we spoke to at this county fair in Nebraska was in the least bit concerned about the allegations of Russian collusion.
Media's taking it out of proportion.
But there's email proof now that...
Yeah, some, I guess. I don't know. I haven't followed it for a while now because of that. But
does it worry you?
No.
I think it's just a farce spun by the left because they lost.
Did you vote for him?
Yes, I did.
Are you happy with the job he's doing?
You bet.
Amongst Republican voters, Donald Trump's approval ratings have remained steady at 85%. But there is a concern amongst some of his supporters that he's more fixated about his problems than theirs. The mayor of Norfolk, Nebraska, is Josh Moaning.
What I hear from people is less tweeting and more doing. I think there's kind of a bewilderment about the compulsion to tweet about anything and everything, and so I think people would like to see him focus more on working on some of his campaign promises.
In America's fiercely patriotic heartland, where rodeos routinely start with the singing of the anthem, it seems anomalous that voters aren't concerned about Russian meddling. They seem more mistrustful of the media than Moscow. Another indication of the polarizing effect of the Trump presidency and of how the United States increasingly sounds like an oxymoron.
God bless America, God bless the great state of Nebraska. Ladies and gentlemen, you ready to rodeo?
Nick Bryant reporting from Norfolk, Nebraska, where Donald Trump is still their man. We're heading out of Lower Hutt, Wellington, where an American family whose application for residency has been declined on what's effectively technical grounds related to the business they were running, have packed up, moved out and are returning to the US tomorrow. The Jensens don't want to go, and many of the New Zealanders they met here don't want them to go. An appeal is currently before the Associate Immigration Minister, Scott Simpson. The family had closed Java Point, the cafe they've been running in Lower Hutt, but realising their case to return was less compelling if they didn't have a business to return to, the co-owner of the building the cafe's in has decided to keep Java Point open. Now, Mark Ogden isn't a barista. He has no experience at all in the field, but he's spoken to the staff. They've got some great support in, and they're going to give it a shot.
We just had meetings with the existing staff. We've got a company, Clear from Cafe Educators, coming in to help us to bring in some additional staff for Monday so that we can actually provide a good service and keep the doors open for the Jensens to return.
So you are doing this with a view to them coming back?
That's the sole reason. We don't want to be in the cafe business. You know, it's not our core business at all. It's we came to this decision yesterday, sitting down with Steve. One of the ministers, the MP, suggested that they shouldn't sell the business because it, might not necessarily look as favourable for them coming back. So the decision has been, well, okay, we'll keep the doors open for them with their staff.
Same staff, same business, same name, same everything, just no Jensens.
Same everything, no Jensens. So it's certainly not going to be the same experience, we know that, but we know that the local support for the Jensens will keep that spirit alive, and hopefully the minister will see that, as a community, we want the Jensens back.
Have you been struck by the support from the community? Are people talking to you about this? Are people coming in to engage, to support, to encourage? Is that going on?
Oh, unbelievably. I mean, I was talking with one of the trade suppliers this morning, having to ring up and get accounts going because obviously that had been closed down. And people have said, look, I've heard the story. Don't worry about the accounts. Just order what it is. We'll send it in to you. It's like, that's pretty unheard of. I get the feeling that, even people that don't know the family and they've heard the story think that it's probably unfair, and hey, if they can do their bit to help keep the business alive for the Jensens, then they want to do their bit to support as well. And if that means that we're not having to jump through hoops to open accounts, and I'm not sure if you've opened a business before, but if you haven't been trading as that company, it just takes a bit longer. So they're just, opening doors for us.
And so you find yourself in the possession of a cafe.
Yes. And we're certainly not, we haven't purchased a cafe. We're just running it for the Jensen family. It's we're going to do our best to provide a service that keeps the doors open, so that when the minister says yes, they can come back, they've got something to come back to.
It's Mark Ogden who's going to keep the Jensen's Cafe open in case, and they've very much got their fingers crossed there in Lower Hutt, the minister's discretion to allow them back into the country is indeed exercised. That's it from Checkpoint for tonight. Please take care if you're on the roads. If you are trying to get anywhere in the centre of the North Island, our strong advice is don't. You can't really. State Highway 1 from the very top, the northernmost point of the Desert Road, all the way along the east side of Mount Ruapehu, right down through Wairarapa, down through Taihape and down to Hunterville is closed. It's an unusually long stretch of State Highway 1 to close. Normally you would go around the other way through Ohakune and up through National Park, but that is closed as well. Parts of Canterbury, roads closed, Porters Pass, and icy and treacherous in areas. Do take care if you're out. Southland, a bit of ice on the roads there too, of course. A good night to stay inside and keep warm if you can. Thank you for being with us on behalf of our excellent team and all our reporters who've been out in the weather today. We appreciate the privilege of your company. We will be back tomorrow night at 5 o'clock. Until then, a very good evening indeed.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. The bad weather isn't over for parts of the lower and central North Island, which are being lashed by gales, heavy rain and snowfalls. Ohakune and Raitahi in the Central Plateau are cut off, with highways closed by heavy snow. A group of motorists has been rescued on the Napier-Taupo highway after snow forced it to close. Torrential rain has been falling all day in Wellington and Wairarapa, causing flooding in some areas and pushing up river levels. And many people who are without power from Wellington to Taranaki are being warned they may have to wait until tomorrow for supplies to be restored due to ongoing conditions. A local community group says high-quality gold found in the Karangahake Gorge between Pairoa and Waihi by New Talisman gold mines should stay in the ground where it belongs. And thousands of people braved the cold in Dunedin today to cheer on